I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, the man who thought up and started geoengineeringwatch.org. His name is Dane Wigington. Dane, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for your continued help with sounding the alarm.
Well, you said you would file a lawsuit, or actually multiple lawsuits in multiple countries, I suspect, and the first one has been filed in Canada. Can you just give us a brief description of a lawsuit? It is for aerosol spraying, climate engineering. It is specifically for that against the Queen, the government of Canada, whatever, correct?
Correct. It was filed on March 9th. Full media press announcements will happen later this week, but it was filed March 9th. And again, this is the first lawsuit of its type. We hope to follow soon in the U.S. We're quite close to filing what's called a 60-day notice in the U.S., which is it's a very different process with the filing in the U.S. So that on the 60-day notice, everyone who could be a potential defendant in this case, like Department of Defense, the Federal EPA, FAA, the list is very long, so there's a lot more work with the U.S. process. But we hope that what we do, Greg, will be a template for others in other states, not just one or two in the U.S., but multiple states will file. And as you know, and as we've talked about before, we also have legislation that's currently being under consideration in Rhode Island for the banning of these programs. So between all these methods, it's all designed to raise public awareness to the fact that we're under an all-out assault from toxic climate engineering, and this is what the suit in Canada is based on.
And you have brought up the fact that, yes, we do have some, some ozone layer depletion. Humans have done some damage, but you're saying the biggest human damage by far is what they're spraying high altitude. The deniers will call, those are contrails, for 50 miles across the sky. But you're saying that is the number one thing hurting the planet and destroying the atmosphere is the high altitude, the solar radiation management, the climate, geoengineering or climate engineering, whatever you want to call it. That's you say that's the number one thing hurting the planet.
I frame that very carefully. What I've said is this: it's the single greatest destructive factor of all, but certainly not the only one. The human race has been very poor stewards of our planet, Greg. There's no arguing that. We've decimated it from every direction. So, and I think, Fukushima is a huge example of that. I mean, the fallout and catastrophe from Fukushima is immeasurable and growing. We've cut down our forests. We've lost 55% of Earth's original tree cover, a 55% mortality rate. We've paved the planet, poisoned the oceans. I mean, where would we stop? But for a single greatest disrupting and decimating factor would be climate engineering. And in regard, let's take ozone depletion, Greg. With the ozone layer, we've been told it was CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, but that appears to have been a red flag, and we have now enough data to prove that the greatest destructive factor by far on the ozone layer is geoengineering, disrupting the hydrological cycle, toxifying the planet. But we have governmental agencies, Greg, who are set up to hide this fact from the population, to mask it. All the data is processed through central processing centers where basically a fictitious number is put out. So, Greg, you've probably felt how hot the sun feels on your face, haven't you?
Sure.
And people think they're getting older. Maybe it's their imagination. Again, as I've stated before, we're seeing UVB levels that are 1,000% higher than we're being told. So we have from everything from temperatures to UV readings. We have all the data being skewed to hide the severity of what's happening from the population for as long as possible. And people better wake up to this fact, because people are worried about their retirement accounts, their future plans in many different arenas. If we don't take care of this issue, and a lot of others after we take care of this, but we have to take care of this as a priority, or we're not going to be realizing any of the plans that we've all laid out.
Your lawsuit in Canada, any anecdotal evidence? Anybody call you? Anybody, get any back channel feedback of, I can't believe you did this, you're in trouble, or, any threats or anything like that? You got a big, bad law firm doing this. These are real, you said that these are real experienced attorneys. They'd have to be to do this. Have you got any feedback that you could pass along about, are they upset in Canada, the officials? Are they angry? Are they threatening?
There's some pushback so far. It's an experienced environmental attorney that's the head of this, And we'll see how things develop, and we'll see what the blowback is in the states on this issue. But I think it's important to remember, Greg, we have friends, I believe, and allies behind the curtain that know this is going on, that want it to stop. As I've mentioned before, I've been contacted by a retired Air Force general, some other people in the military that now know this is going on. So I truly believe we have a growing number of allies behind the curtain that want and know this is going on, that want it to stop as bad as we do. So, well, let's hope that that's true, and that those number of allies grow, because this is truly an all-out assault against all life on Earth. How long can we hold our breath, Greg? Every breath anybody takes is laden with these materials, and we know that from lab testing. We absolutely know it. There's no speculation or theory or conjecture. So how long, if we're not firing on all neurons, and we see the human health statistics that we would expect and correlate directly with this, the massive skyrocketing Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, COPD, every other commercial is an asthma commercial, isn't it, Greg? I mean, don't people take notice of the fact that something really radical is going on? And anybody who looks up, I mean, how incredibly obvious is this monstrosity in our skies that's going on? The climate engineering, it's wreaking havoc on the planet, Greg. How many people do you know that now realize the weather is wrong?
Well, yes. I mean, crazy, hotter than hot and colder than cold, and snow when, up in the Northeast, they had winter all over again. But you kind of dodged my question again. Did you get any threats? Did you get any blowback from the folks in Canada or anywhere else?
No.
Not, they're just mum, quiet, zip.
No, the only real, interesting communication I've ever had like that, on about 10 o'clock at night on the way home from a large presentation, this was some time back, I got a call from a federal EPA employee that clearly knew where I was and what I was doing, and wondered why I was still beating this drum again. But I've been largely left alone since then, and it's important to also consider, Greg, that I've never been a part of the system. I've never signed my oath to the system. Government scientists, U.S. government scientists, have no First Amendment protection, none. They're not free to speak out anyway. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, there's a federal gag order. I want all your listeners to consider that. There's a federal gag order on all National Weather Service and all NOAA employees. I mean, how much more obvious is this situation? They're trying to plug leaks in the ship. And we have environmental scientists being fired all over. Canada's let go a huge number of their scientists. Australia has just fired 450 of their frontline environmental scientists. Why? Because they want to cover up what's happening in any way they can. And again, they're simply trying to obscure the severity of what's unfolding from the public as long as possible. So I would argue this again: if we don't take care of what's happening in our environment and our skies right now, nothing else is going to matter. All these financial plans that people have and all their future aspirations won't mean anything soon. That's how bad it is.
Well, when you say soon, right now you're saying you were predicting that there's going to be some big changes in the Great Barrier Reef. They said by next month, by the end of May, the Great Barrier Reef will lose half its life or something like that. Talk about that.
Here's what's happening with the Great Barrier Reef. These are the kind of headlines.
It's in Australia, folks, if you guys don't know. Get in Australia. Go ahead.
Correct. Great Barrier Reef, one of the 7 great wonders of the world, the largest living organism on the planet. This is the kind of headlines we said would come at geoengineeringwatch.org. This is what I have stated the data would produce soon. And now what we have is this is about a 10-day-old headline, so we're about 20 days left of the time frame they've given, that half of the barrier reef would die in the next 30 days. So we have about 20 days left in that time frame. And you really need to stand back and think about that. Half of this organism that's countless millions of years old will die in the blink of an eye, 30 days. So we've lost half the barrier reef in the last 3 decades. Because
the oceans are getting warmer. Is that what I read in that, you sent me some data on that, and I said, wow, the oceans are superheating to your data.
That's correct. They are. And so we have half of the barrier reef that died in the last 3 decades, and we have the other half dying in the next 30 days. You can see the accelerating equation. It's absolutely as nonlinear as it can be. There's another factor with the barrier reef, and it's not just the barrier reef. We have reefs dying around the globe. But the unimaginably intense UV radiation, which is not being talked about. It's being hidden. And again, people simply need to start touching car surfaces, feel how hot the sun feels on their skin, look at trees, how they're being singed, and the bark's being burned off the south side. We have people asleep at the wheel, Greg. They're completely asleep at the wheel right now, and we're trying desperately to wake them up so they can help us expose this issue while we still have something left to salvage. Period.
So if you're out in the sun, just a warning to the people out there, don't trust your sunscreen or whatever. Just kind of stay out of the sun unless you have to be in it. Is that what you would warn people?
Absolutely. And we have NASA.
I mean, yes, use sunscreen, use that, but you're saying it's so bright, it's way brighter than what they're saying that sunscreen protects for.
Way brighter. And the intense UV has very dire ramifications for vision. It's very destructive to the eyes. And we have NASA. It took them 11 years to tell us that they had, in 2004, detected UV radiation levels on the planet comparable to those on the surface of Mars. Think about that. Shouldn't that be a headline somewhere? That's how decimated the ozone layer is. And the barrier reef, how many people have heard that, oh, by the way, half of the largest living organism on Earth is dying in the blink of an eye? And people don't hear about it because what are we seeing? The Donald Trump idiocracy and the Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and these cast of clowns that are simply designed for distraction while the planet is literally imploding. We have fish floating up from Fiji to Florida, Greg, because the oceans are, again, superheating. And
you're saying, and let me interrupt here, just so we get this, you're saying it's because of the solar radiation management, the chemtrails, the chemical spraying. You're saying because of that, a lot of that, the number one factor is that.
Okay, it's the single greatest factor, but I'm not saying that that's the only factor, not at all. Again, any form of human activity on the planet, any form, is a form of geoengineering. The atmosphere doesn't know whether a particle came from a smokestack or the back of a jet. It doesn't matter. The atmosphere doesn't realize the difference, so we can't separate one form of damage from another. There are all forms of damage. What I'm saying is that the single greatest destructive factor, if we isolate one particular factor out, is absolutely climate engineering, a willful, deliberate, destructive attempt to manipulate Earth's climate systems. But I am in no way negating all the other forms of damage. I mean, we're putting a coal-fired power plant online once a week in China, for example. We're putting 100 million tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. And for those people who say CO2 is not a problem, I'm asking your listeners to use their sense of reason. Tell that to the oceans that are acidifying at an astounding rate, so much so that organisms can't produce shells anymore in many cases. I mean, the oceans are unimaginably acidic right now and getting worse by the day because they're absorbing this carbon. So what I'm asking your listeners to do is to look at data, don't look at headlines, don't believe me, simply dig deeper and look at real data and understand how severe our situation is right now. And you have the top U.S. military brass stating on the record, the single greatest threat to U.S. national security is by far the disintegrating climate, while at the same time they are helping to disintegrate the climate with the programs that they are orchestrating in the attempt to hide the severity from the population as long as possible. So we're on a very, very negative downward trajectory, Greg.
And speaking of data, a few weeks ago there were these, oh, hey, wow, California got some rain. Oh, happy days are here again. Looks like they're going to get some rain and there's going to be some wet weather. And I thought I'd call you. I looked at the drought map and maybe it's gotten a little the severe, extreme. The dark cherry, dark blood red map is huge over California. Has things gotten better in California and out west in terms of rain and water?
Not much, no. And here's why. Again, I'm asking people to consider that what our government and other governments are doing and their agencies are doing are trying desperately to hide the magnitude of what's unfolding till the last possible moment, at which time total collapse ensues. So in regard to the rain in California, there has been about average rainfall in certain locations like Redding in Northern California over the urban area in the valley. What's not happening? The exponential increase in rain that should occur over the mountains, which is called orographic enhancement, that is not occurring. So even though some of the valley areas like Redding have gotten about normal rainfall, where I live, we're about half what we should have had. I live right on the east side of Lake Shasta, the largest reservoir in the state. So we have about half the rainfall we should have gotten. And this is because the particulates in the atmosphere they form too many condensation nuclei, which migrates the rain. It tends to make the rain migrate right over us, and that's the goal of solar radiation management, to create the largest cloud cover canopy possible from the existing moisture. So they siphon this moisture off, and we'll have half the U.S. covered in largely rainless cloud cover from the moisture they've siphoned off from the West Coast. So no, our situation is not much better at all. And These particles are desiccants. They absorb and accrete all available moisture, so they dry the atmosphere out, Greg, and that sucks the moisture out of the foliage, out of everything else. That's why the fires are worse than they've ever been. We have root systems being poisoned from these bioavailable materials. This is where the lawsuits come back in again. This is who's involved in the potential defendants in the U.S. suit, for example. All these agencies that are hiding what's happening, and we know they're hiding. I've been in closed-door meetings with Redding Environmental Waste in Northern California, who test the Sacramento River, which is the drinking water for California. I've seen the test with my own eyes, massive spikes of aluminum in the Sacramento River, the drinking water for California, and they are hiding this, willfully, deliberately, illegally, hiding the contamination from the population, which is a severe health threat. So this is happening across the board. We have these agencies absolutely doing everything they can to cover up what's happening because their paychecks and their pensions depend on that.
Pure evil. Listen, I want to plug your site, geoengineeringwatch.org. You started this thing with your own money. You spent all your, you tell me, all your retirement, everything. There is a donation button. I know I've been on the site many times. Great information. It's all free. All there is a donation button on the upper right-hand side. It says donate. And, Dane, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about the damage, telling us about the lawsuit in Canada and the coming lawsuit coming to the states here in the U.S. Thank you, Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org.
Thank you, Greg.